For me, the hardest part has actually been fundraising. So as I said before, women's health still plays a side role when it comes to investment priorities. And especially like during the peak of COVID or with the current AI wave, it's hard to get the attention and funding for maternal health innovation. Even though preeclampsia affects millions of women globally, it really doesn't get the urgency or the capital it deserves.
Some investments chase returns, others shift reality. Welcome to Blindspot Capital, the show where we trace the capital flows, structural decisions, and invisible forces shaping the future of health. We go deep on what's overlooked, underfunded, or misunderstood, especially where women's health, longevity, and AI intersect. Because this isn't just about the next big trend, it's about who gets seen and who gets funded. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Blindspot Capital, where we decode what gets funded, what gets forgotten, and why. I'm your host, Maryann, and today we're talking about something that should have been solved decades ago, a reliable way to detect preeclampsia. Now, for those of you who don't know this word or this term, preeclampsia is one of the deadliest complications in pregnancy. It affects an estimated 5 to 8% of all pregnancies globally, and it contributes to 10 to 15% of maternal deaths worldwide. And yet, in 2025, we're still telling women to wait and see while their blood pressure spikes, their organs start to fail, and their lives hang in the balance. Early detection could save thousands of lives each year, but right now, most women are still being diagnosed too late. My guest today is Matthias Wipf, CEO of Momm Diagnostics. He and his team have developed Pre-Exclude, a point-of-care diagnostic test for preeclampsia that could transform how we manage maternal risk, not just in hospitals, but anywhere that care is delivered. So I'm really excited to have this episode and to talk to Matthias today. And today we're going to talk about the science, the struggle, and the system failure that let this blind spot linger for far too long. So Matthias, welcome to the show.
Hi, Maryann. Thanks a lot for having me. It's great.
No, it's great to have you here. It's a conversation that I think when I first heard about what you're doing, you and your team, I was super excited about it. And I really couldn't wait to have this conversation with you. So thank you for making the time. I know it's incredibly busy right now because you are in the middle of your raising clinical studies and so on. So thank you for making the time.
Of course, yeah.
So, as I said, I really could not believe that in 2025, we still didn't have a fast, reliable way to diagnose this. So I think what first drew you? I think that's my first question. I want to kind of get into the why. What first drew you into the maternal health space and specifically to preeclampsia?
To be honest, I didn't really know much about preeclampsia. It was actually my co-founder, Oren, who brought this to my attention. He did some work at Stanford University, where he'd been working on a biosensor technology to detect specific biomarkers for preeclampsia. And that sparked my curiosity, and I started looking into it. And I was shocked by how common preeclampsia is and how many people in my own circle had experienced it or had some complications with it. And I think that's when it really hit me that this is a serious condition and that current testing methods are just not good enough, as you said. Like, I couldn't believe that there's a more accessible and efficient way to detect it. Yeah, this sense of urgency quickly turned my motivation. And I think that was the beginning of Momm. So turning the research we've been doing for many years into a solution that actually makes a difference.
So tell us about the early days of Momm. So what was the moment that you realized that actually this idea can become a company?
At that time, I was working in California at Avails Medical. It's a diagnostic startup in Silicon Valley. And that experience gave me a deep understanding of the challenges and opportunities in developing technologies for medical diagnostics. And the whole Silicon Valley startup environment was just very vibrant at that time. And around then, we started exploring the idea of applying a specific type of sensor technology for rapid blood testing. And we initiated a collaboration with EMPA, which is a Swiss Federal Research Institute, to test some of those concepts. And while experimenting, I think I had the breakthrough idea how this such a test could be made not only fast and accurate, but also cost effective. And that, I
Mm-hmm.
think for me, that was the turning point. It suddenly became clear that what we had is not just an academic concept, but we had the foundation for a product with real clinical impact. And that's when Momm really started to shape as a company.
Hmm. So you've talked about the realization that this is something that could have real clinical impact and you could also deliver it in a cost-effective way. I'd like to dig into that a little bit, but before we go there, could you maybe paint a picture for listeners who don't know what preeclampsia is? What does it actually do to a pregnant woman? I guess the question, what is the human cost of delay?
Yeah, so preeclampsia is often called the silent killer of pregnancy because it can develop suddenly during the second half of pregnancy and sometimes without obvious symptoms. And then it can affect multiple organs like liver, kidneys, or the brain. And if it's not caught early, it can escalate rapidly, leading to seizures, organ failure, or even the death of mother and baby. And what's shocking is that in many places, the current approach is essentially wait and see. So, yeah, as you said in the beginning, you tell a woman to wait and see while her organ shuts down. And I think that's really the human cost of a delayed detection. So, early diagnosis is everything, or timely
Mm.
diagnosis. So, it's really the difference between managing high risk pregnancy safely or facing a life threatening emergency. So with the right tools, we can detect preeclampsia before it reaches a critical point. And that's what drives us at Momm, to make really early, reliable detection accessible everywhere.
So let's talk a little bit about the current methodology that we use. What are the current methods that we use to detect one of the deadliest pregnancy conditions today? And what are the limitations of that?
So today, most of the pregnancies are monitored using blood pressure readings or urine tests for protein. And this method is close to 100 years old and is not always reliable. So by the time these symptoms show up, or show up clearly enough, the disease may already be progressing to a late and dangerous stage. And so it's a reactive and not a preventive approach. What makes this a blind spot is that we have the science. We know specific biomarkers like SFLT1 and PLGF, two proteins closely associated with preeclampsia. And by measuring these proteins, we can really signal or flag preeclampsia much earlier. But access to these biomarker tests is limited. So they require central lab testing, expensive infrastructure, trained personnel, and the test in the end is very expensive. So that makes those tests unavailable in most routine pregnancy care setting, and especially in lower resource settings. It's also a blind spot because in some areas it affects really 1 in 10 pregnancies. So especially in the global south, it's a huge problem. And yet it still doesn't get the attention it deserves. Up to today, it's underdiagnosed, underprioritized, and also underfunded. And yeah, we're trying to change this.
Yeah. Now, you mentioned the prevalence in the global south. So I think that's something that I'm familiar with. It is really a condition that is really prevalent in the global south. And I think you've touched on a couple of things. So the blind spot, and this is Blind Spot Capital, and that's exactly what we do. We try to do with this podcast to make the blind spots more visible. So if I hear you correctly, we're still relying on methods from the sort of like the 19th century to detect something that is actually a very deadly pregnancy conditions. Why do you think this has been such a persistent blind spot?
I don't know the exact reasons. I have my suspicions why women's health has been underfunded and overlooked over the last decades. So I think now it's about to change. I feel like the momentum is there, like women's health finally gets the attention it deserves. And with preeclampsia, I think it's hard to say. I don't know. It's like so many other women-related problems have been overlooked and neglected.
Yeah. I'm just thinking out loud here because yesterday I was reading the data from Carta about where money is flowing into when we look into sort of like the venture space. And a lot of funding, clearly, I mean, we've seen quite a funding drop, into, VC funding between, say, the end of COVID, so 21 versus today. We've seen a significant drop. in VC funding. But I think the interesting thing is when we look at where funding is going, a lot of that is going towards, say, AI tools. You tag on AI to it and you've got the money. So why did you decide to develop a diagnostic test rather than maybe go down the route of a digital app or an AI tool like so many others were saying?
Yeah. So there's clearly a huge potential in AI for, there's more and more data and there's definitely a huge potential. But we think preeclampsia is a biological problem and you can't predict it with an app alone. You need to measure what's happening inside the body. So yeah, digital tools, AI is great for tracking symptoms or flagging risks, but they do rely on data and then it's often too late or too vague. So we wanted to go straight to the source, the biomarkers that signal preeclampsia before symptoms appear. And that's why we focus on building a diagnostic test, something that gives a clear, actionable result right at the point of care. So you prick a finger and within minutes, you know whether the patient is at risk, no waiting, no guesswork. And that's the kind of clarity doctors and the patient want.
Mm-hmm. So I will ask you to walk us through how Pre-Exclude test works because I'm very keen to hear it. And I'm sure the listeners are also very keen to understand the technology. But I want to kind of circle back to something you said earlier, about women's health. And it really is indeed having a moment. And I think I'm very pleased to see that. We still obviously need to get more funding into the space. But I think the important thing is the trend is moving in the right direction. But I wonder, have you maybe faced skepticism from investors or stakeholders who maybe didn't understand the urgency or the scale of the problem that you're trying to solve?
Yes, definitely. So especially in Momm's early years, we faced quite a lot of skepticism. At that time, when we started off with the idea or started the company, at that time, preeclampsia just wasn't perceived as important or urgent enough problem by many investors and stakeholders. And especially in German-speaking countries like in Switzerland, where we are based, preeclampsia was not known. I mean, just the term preeclampsia was not known. So people often underestimated its prevalence and severity, and that made it really difficult to raise money. So back then, maternal health, I think in general, just didn't get the attention it deserved, certainly not in terms of innovation or funding. But thankfully, as I said before, I think this is changing. So in the last few years, awareness around preeclampsia has grown significantly. I mean, I get it from everyday conversations I have with friends. I have many friends who've been pregnant over the last couple of years, and also the perception, the communication with the patient has changed significantly just recently. And I think there's a much better understanding now that preeclampsia is really a major global health issue, and that early detection is a great tool to literally save lives.
Hmm. I want to come back to the women's health topic. Have you ever faced situation where people kind of dismiss this as, well, this is a women's health topic? And if you have, how do you respond when you have those situations?
Early on, we focused on trying to address investors with a clear interest in women's health because, yeah, there was also a lot of investors were saying, no, we're not investing in those spaces. They had specific topics in mind. Very few of them really highlighted women's health. So we tried to engage with those investors, but still preeclampsia was kind of a underestimated problem. And now this is definitely different. I'm getting contacted very often now, just asking about our technology, getting great support, people stating how important our work is. And so it's changing.
Okay, that's great to hear. So I want to kind of come to the technology because I think that is crucial. Can you walk us through how the Pre-Exclude test works in layman's terms? So not in Matthias's terms, because you are a PhD. So break it down to us like a 10-year-old. And why does this matter? That this is point of care.
Yeah. So, well, Pre-Exclude, this is our rapid preeclampsia test, is a simple finger stick blood test. So you take a drop of blood, like with a glucose test, and then the sample flows through a small test strip, and we have a little device that reads specific biomarkers in the blood, indicating whether a woman is at risk of developing preeclampsia.
Mm-hmm.
So the test itself just takes a few minutes, and that's what really makes a difference with Pre-Exclude. It's designed for the use at the point of care, meaning while the patients see the doctors. That means it doesn't require a big lab or specialized staff. It can be used right in the clinic or even in low resource settings. And that matters not just because it's accurate, but we say because it's available and affordable. And when you can test on the spot and get the result within minutes, it completely changes the patient journey. So you're no longer waiting days for the lab result, but doctors can really make an informed decision during the same patient visit. And that speed can really be the difference between managing the condition early or that somebody has to rush to the emergency room. So with Pre-Exclude, our goal is not just improving diagnostics, but really transforming the access to care. Does that make sense?
It does. Clinician having the results in minutes and the impact of that on the patient journey and the care that the patient receives.
Yes, often women with symptoms or doctors would be scared saying, oh, this looks like preeclampsia, but they don't have any further information. So these women would be hospitalized or sent for further checkups. That puts those women under enormous stress, anxiety, but also it raises healthcare costs. And our test can really give clarity during the patient visit so doctors can really take informed decisions and optimize patient management.
So this has an impact not just on the patient journey, but also on healthcare costs. And we know that, most healthcare systems around the world are facing a lot of cost pressure. So this is also quite beneficial from sort of that, the cost reduction or optimization point of view for the providers of care.
Yeah, I think it's most of the countries or most of the regions face this issue that healthcare costs are exploding.
Yes.
And like using the right tools at the right time can really help to save so much money and free up resources. And that's where we see the importance, right? If every informed decision where you can be sure and you don't need further checkups, you don't need to have 2 or 3 follow-up appointments, really frees up resources and saves money. And yeah, last but not least, for the pregnant women, it really makes their journey more easy, lessens anxiety, and they can hopefully enjoy their pregnancy. So
yes, that's an important point that you raise. And I think when we think about healthcare, it's of course, first and foremost, we're thinking about making it actually healthcare and not sick care. So really like that sort of systems design from a patient point of view. But I think it's also really important that this is a technology that also can, because when we think about healthcare, there's so many different stakeholders. I think healthcare is one of those, and the way we've set it up is one of those industries or sectors where the agency, as a patient, you have a relationship with the insurance company where you're paying a premium. And as long as you're healthy, then you are the fantastic patient for the insurance companies. But then when you get sick, then you are dealing with the healthcare system, with the doctors and, the pharma company who provide the medication. And for as long as you're sick, you're a fantastic patient to certain stakeholders, but you're actually not a great patient to, say, the insurance companies or the state who have the costs to bear. So I think having a solution that improves the patient journey, that gives, clinicians a tool or a way of delivering care in a much faster, easier and better way, but also reducing costs for, potentially the insurance companies who are the payers and the state. I think that's a great solution.
yeah, thanks. No, we see exactly the same way. So it's such a complex system, and then it's not just one system. Like every country has its own system. So, and
Exactly.
that's really now what we're in the middle of this, finding the right strategy, like how to design and
Yeah.
set up the product in the right way that it has an impact, that it will be used, really this accessibility and also affordability in the end for the patient. So,
What's been the hardest part of bringing this to life?
well, we definitely had our fair share of technological challenges. Developing a reliable, low-cost diagnostics that works with just a single drop of blood is definitely not easy. But honestly, as you said, like I'm a scientist, so I enjoy these problems, and those are the puzzles that keep me motivated. For me, the hardest part has actually been fundraising. So, as I said before, women's health still plays a side role when it comes to investment priorities. And especially like during the peak of COVID or with the current AI wave, it's hard to get the attention and funding for maternal health innovation. Even though preeclampsia affects millions of women globally, it really doesn't get the urgency or the capital it deserves. So yeah, as I said before, like I think that's slowly starting to change. Yeah, but breaking through this bias is really it's been my biggest hurdle on this journey so far.
So if Pre-Exclude is scaled, what's the global impact that you envision?
So yeah, with Pre-Exclude, we envision a world where diagnostics would be brought much closer to the patient. So not just in advanced and well-equipped hospitals, but also down to low resource settings where access is really often limited or non-existent. And our goal is to make early detection of preeclampsia possible anywhere, from rural clinics to community health centers. And for this, we're also actively planning collaborations with NGOs and foundations to bring our solution to high burden regions where maternal mortality from preeclampsia remains unacceptably high.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a huge potential to save lives on a large scale. And this is definitely also a part that drives us. So Pre-Exclude is just the beginning. We would like to build our technology as a platform. So we aim to expand it to cover other critical conditions in maternal health. Long-term impact would not just be one better test, but a new standard for accessible and affordable care during pregnancy, and ideally worldwide. So that's the vision we have.
And that actually, it ties in, it's a nice segue to my next question. I wanted to get your thoughts on how you think diagnostics, particularly in maternal health, how does that need to evolve, say, over the next 10 years?
My perspective is diagnostics, and in particular in maternal health, should become more accessible and also more personalized. So for too long, we've relied on outdated tools, as we said, like blood pressure measurement and proteinuria, tools for reactive care. And I think, yeah, from now on or the next decade, we need to shift to a more proactive and also data-driven approach to detect complications before symptoms appear. It should be done in a way that works for all healthcare settings and not just in well-funded hospitals. So our perspective is really moving away from centralized, expensive lab systems and more towards the point of care solutions, which are affordable, portable, and easy to use. So every pregnant woman, regardless of where she lives, should have access to timely and reliable diagnostics. I think the challenge is we need to integrate diagnostics more closely with digital health tools. So we now see those tools exploding and their potential, but to really integrate the diagnostics reliably so results can guide decisions in real time, ideally. So yeah, I think that still requires more investment in innovation. So yeah, that will be important for maternal healthcare.
What keeps you up at night?
Beside my kids. So many things, yeah. As an entrepreneur, startup founder, yeah, it obviously comes with a fair share of sleepless nights, worrying about funding, timelines, partnerships, technology. So there's always something on my mind. But yeah, at the same time, it also gives me hope. So, and it keeps me going, knowing that technology can truly make a difference. The thought that Pre-Exclude will be able to save lives and prevent suffering for mothers, babies, and whole families. So yeah, that gives me a sense of purpose. And I think that's also what I enjoy. So.
If you could say one thing to investors who maybe don't have women's health on their radar, what would it be?
Well, yeah, women's health is important. It's pretty much half of the population. And in particular, when you invest in maternal health, so which is a sector of women's health, you're not investing in women, you're investing in families and communities and entire health systems. So this market is huge. The medical need is urgent, and the return, both financially and also societal, is really undeniable. Yeah, I don't know the exact reason why it's been overlooked for so long, and it has not been prioritized. But I see that's changing, and yeah, smart investors are getting it now. So yeah, I would say women's health is definitely not a niche. So don't miss out on the big opportunities in healthcare. Yeah.
Matthias, it's been such a pleasure to speak to you. I mean, really, thank you for doing the hard thing. What you do is really not easy. And I know that as a startup founder, you wear so many hats and sometimes several hats at the same time. So thank you for choosing this problem to solve and really for staying the course. And also to your team for turning a single drop of blood into a diagnostic breakthrough that could change everything for women with the predisposition to preeclampsia.
Thank you so much for having me. Pleasure was all mine.
To everyone listening, share this episode with a founder, a policymaker, or anyone who thinks diagnostics cannot be transformative, because it can, as you heard it. And as always, keep looking for the blind spots. And when you find them, don't look away. Thanks. See you on the next episode. Thanks, Matthias. That's it for this episode of Blindspot Capital. If you learned something, share it. And if you're building something, reach out. And if you're investing in the future, make sure you're not doing it blind.